reproductive and supplies are available where they're needed and when they're needed, and also ending GBV and other harmful practices, your female genital mutilation and child marriage and that sort of thing. And we've also picked up, and I wouldn't say a new work stream, but it's something that we want to be a bit more vocal about, which is called demographic resilience, which speaks to a country's ability to understand and anticipate and respond to changes in its population dynamics. People talk a lot about the bulging youth population in Africa or the aging population in Asia. So those are things that, because our agency works with census, we've been doing census since our inception. So we are able to anticipate this maybe shifts in age, in fertility, in migration. And we really want to start working with, we have been working with governments, to try and harness opportunities. And also just to anticipate what negative effects may come because of these population dynamics and your own policies and how you treat those. I don't want to start getting into it, but that's just one aspect of data that, without looking far, is becoming mainstream in our work. So before I worked for this agency, I worked in Botswana in a health system strengthening agency, and that was really the first time I saw how data is used in this kind of space. We're working in the HIV/AIDS health space, and if you know a little bit about Botswana, we are dispersed all over the country. So big land, small population, and there's really no best way for you to bring resources to people unless if you look at the data, dynamics. And before that, I was working in a completely different area. I was in the private sector, which is a little bit more advanced in how they use data as compared to the rest of us. I was a market development intern at the Botswana Stock Exchange. So that was some serious data crunching every day. Anyway, I really hope that we can make today's session a bit more interactive so that we can all learn from each other. The nice thing about my job is that I get to work with people from all aspects of life, from your nurses to your doctors to your actual coders, and it's always a nice learning experience. So I hope that we can make today's session interactive because I think we can all learn something from each other here. Can you guys see my screen? Slideshow. Wow, this works. Can you guys share my, okay, great. How does this work now? So before we get started, it's just some sort of an icebreaker. I was thinking maybe we could go around and just share how data is used in our different organizations. I just shared, but it doesn't also have to be in an organization. It can also just be in your own personal capacity. You can also feel free to just drop it in the chat if you don't want to talk. Does anyone want to give it a try? Okay. Now, Buddha says, I'm going to assume I'm new in this sector. Okay. Mostly use data to back up research proposals and support business development. That is one area that is actually, I think, most common. My interaction with data was also research when I was still in undergrad. My first interaction with data. Are there any entrepreneurs here? Okay, fine. Maybe let's just go around and we all talk about what we do or what we hope to achieve from these sessions. Just a brief introduction so that I can understand where some of you are coming from, and then maybe we could try to relate the rest of the session to that. We'll go around alphabetically. So let's start with you, Francis.
All right, good morning. My name is Frances Uhomwebi. I am a trade negotiator and economist. So I work in international trade, negotiating trade deals between Nigeria and other African countries and other countries in general, not just African. And so I am looking forward to learning more about how to use data and data analytics to drive and inform policy recommendations and policy analysis. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. Although I would say that you use more data than all of us here. Gloria, you're next. Like I said, if you're not able to talk, you can also just, drop your comments or responses in the chat box. Okay, fine. While we wait. Okay.
Hello.
Hi, Gloria.
Yeah. Hi, Gloria Makai from Zambia. So like my colleague just stated, I work in an organization where we deal with HIV and AIDS, more especially in adolescent girls and young women. So we use data to gather relevant information and hello.
Gloria, do you know the DREAMS program?
Yes, I'm in the DREAMS program.
Awesome. I worked a little bit with DREAMS when I was home. And we used to copy a lot from Zambia.
We are closing the project on the 30th of September, unfortunately. But it's been worth working with the DREAMS project because I learned a lot more, especially in the data sector, because at least it has taught me a lot on the issue of data, like the importance of it in NGO sector. So I would say, well, hello?
Yes, you are here. We can hear you, Gloria. We seem to have lost Gloria, but for those of you who just joined, we are going around the table, so to speak, briefly introducing ourselves and what our interactions with data have been, or what we aspire to do with what we learn about data and so on. So just feel free to chime in at any time. We were trying to go around alphabetically, but people keep dropping on and off. That's going to be a bit hard. So let's just pretend we're all in the same room and go on and talk. Introduce yourself. Mary, do you want to go next? What about you, APM? Do you want to go next? Just
good
I don't know
morning.
what you're talking about. We're talking about data, Mary.
Okay.
Okay, fine. I'll go down to people who've been here since the beginning. Sarafina, you go next. Sarafina used to work for an NGO that was focused on health and human rights, program design and proposal development. And now she's consulting for proposal development, entrepreneurship, and started a, what is a rage room? Marketing strategies and product development. Is that what a rage room is? Or that's the name of the company?
No, a road room is a safe space to kind of vent out anger, frustration, and emotions in a safe space where you have protective clothing and you can smash like electronics, windscreens, bottles, and stuff.
So mental health.
Mental health, yes.
That's interesting. I think we all need that. A rage room. That is really cool. Does anybody else want to go next, or should we get started with the rest of the session? Insights and patterns. If you always say they study behavioral patterns and perception on sexual related issues, including family planning, I think most of you, well, ones that have spoken up, work in a similar area to me. So the conversation might be skewed and skewed in one way, but still I like that some people are venturing into areas like marketing, because like I said earlier on, the private sector and areas like marketing is one area that has been pretty much advanced in how they use data. I saw somebody here was talking about the retail sector. Nabude was talking about the retail sector. That's also one area where they also use data quite a lot. And I would like to think they're a little bit more advanced than the rest of us. Okay, so without wasting any more time, I was thinking that this could be the flow of our session today. Just to look at data-driven making and its significance for NGOs or for the public sector. But I see that this is one area that we are all familiar with. Somebody has mentioned perception and behavioral studies. And I also mentioned in my introductions how it is also used to, you know, inform policy and also just, you know, where you where you push your resources towards. We'll also look at practical applications of data. I'll try to give one example of data usage in where I work. Like I said, you are also free to chime in at any time. And without making it any more theoretical than it has to be, we'll also look at the tools that people use to support data-driven decision making, and then the governance aspect of it. Why is governance important in implementing data strategies? And we'll end by challenges that are common in this area. And then where you have challenges, there's always opportunities, which I think most of you would be interested in, because that's problems for you and I to solve. I'm also quite new to Zoom, guys. I don't understand why my slides are not moving right now. Okay, data is only valuable if if it informs action. Organizations and companies and governments are actually using data on a daily basis, and there's also just the increasing need for data, looking at how the world is rapidly changing these days. When you look at migration patterns, when you look at sometimes growth patterns, when you look at sometimes disease breakouts, it's almost like things happen too fast these days, we keep saying. And just to give you an example of the UNFPA supply chain unit, which is, like I said earlier on, the retail sector is one area that uses data a lot more than I think we do in the NGO space. It's because of the whole supply chain system. So our supply chain unit sits in Copenhagen, and they work with colleagues in the field. So that's colleagues in every country that we have programs in, and with governments all over the world to use forecasting and ensure that life-saving commodities and contraceptives reach women where they're needed. That could be in humanitarian settings where things unfold pretty fast. I'm sure we all watch the news, and we've seen what happens in wars. And unfortunately, those kind of events affect women and girls, because children are still being born even when there are wars. Your periods are not going to stop because there's a war. But if borders are closed and supermarkets are not working, what do? That's the part for when our programs need to kick in. And just to use a more recent example of forecasting models that we use to estimate the future need for contraceptives and also other life-saving commodities. I mentioned in my introduction, population dynamics, population data, and also just past consumption trends and service delivery statistics. That's why we work with government. I'll mention the recent funding cuts. I don't think if you are from Africa, you don't know what I'm talking about. So with the recent funding cuts, you realize that there were some governments where there was like a critical need for supplies. And also there will be also those governments where we see that certain things have just been sitting on a warehouse for some time, or by also looking at our past consumption data, we know that these goods or services will probably not be needed for the next 6 months or so. So we can use that to sort of repurpose the goods and make sure we use them as a buffer in one country where there's a risk of stock out. And that is just one example that I thought we could draw from. I don't know if anybody else wants to come in here and share an example that's not maybe related to the NGO space, but also relevant. I can't see. Let me see, there's something in the chat box. Temi Tope introduced themselves. I work as a customer support team lead for a technology company. Oh, we have an entrepreneur in the room. Data can be used to understand customer needs and trends. Does anybody want to come in and give a more business-like related answer to how, example to how data is used to inform decisions? I was also home just a few weeks back, and I learned that there was a hospital or clinic that was built in some village because whoever was in charge at the time wanted to build that clinic or that hospital. And that's just one example of how sometimes decision makers make flawed decisions instead of looking at data. Because if you go and build a clinic, at some village because it's your mother's village, it's you're taking away resources from people who actually need them, or from an area where they could actually be of more use. And now you're going to have this resource that you put so much money into not being utilized to its best use. So another real world example of how we rely on data, or we could effectively use data for service delivery.
Hello?
Yes.
Hi. I just wanted to, I guess I wanted to kind of like comment on what you said and talk about how like sometimes data is used to used to feed and support people's particular goals, even if the data, so data in and of itself can appear to be neutral without analysis. It can appear to, like statistics, I guess, can appear to be neutral or can be shaped to support people's ends. So for example, using the one that you just mentioned about someone putting like a hospital in like their mother's village just because, it's their mother's village and they want it there. They could, for example, use data to say that, okay, that that if we put this, even though right now there are not a lot of people that would use these resources or use it, it will draw more, it will create more networks, and it will create more jobs in that space. It will draw more people to that village, and it will drive development. So people can use data in to support various means, in sometimes I guess in even in non-intuitive ways. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for that. It speaks to data integrity, which I hope in one of your sessions you have covered. But I think there's this saying that data doesn't lie, people do. And it highlights the bias that lies in, the human element itself. Data itself is just a collection of facts, but the way in which we collect it, the way in which we analyze it, and then the way in which we present it is where now you bring in the human influence. With the example of the hospital, I don't think these people did not know what they were doing. I don't think these people were not informed, but they had their own goals in mind, and yeah, they use that to drive what they wanted to do. So data can be deceptive depending on how you use it, depending on also your own bias, and also just ignoring facts or the context. And also sometimes also how you collect that data can also be, what in the end leads you to some sort of ill-informed data. If anybody else doesn't have any examples, maybe we should move on, looking at the time. My God, what? I think my slides are messed up here. So here I just wanted to talk about in how in today's world, we cannot just do things, based on feelings or based on a hunch, because of many reasons, there's also just declining resources. There's not much money to go around. So you have to make sure that with the little that you have, you go a long way. With the little that you have, you use it to where you can deliver most impact for the people. So this is one area that's really growing. And the rest of the world is actually pretty advanced in this, but in Africa, it's something that we still need to put our resources in just to build, starting from data collection to how we analyze that data to what we use that data for. I was talking in my introduction about how we now use data for something called the demographic resilience. We've been collecting data on census for a long time. It can never be just about, oh, so many boys are being born, so many girls are being born. This village has 10,000 people. And 10 years ago, it had 5,000 people. We need to draw insights from this data. So even just the way you collect data, back home, there's this thing where before you get into certain buildings, especially government buildings, they make you register on a book, your name, what time you got in, what time you get out. Those are one of the things that really just annoy me, because I'm spending my time giving you this data, but like, what's the end point? What's the end point to it? So when you go on in your careers, always just ask yourself how the data that you are collecting is going to serve the people, is going to make your work any better, is going to improve anybody's life, or make you any money, because some of you here are entrepreneurs, and you don't want to spend your time on something that's not going to improve your bottom line. And most of these things, the language may be different, but it doesn't matter what sector you are in. Data is data. At the end of the day, you use it to, to serve your purpose as an organization. So it's no different from the private sector or the public sector. It's really just the language that matters. I don't know. Does anybody want to share any of their experiences on the growing usage of data? And how we can use it in today's world?
Something that like I'd heard, something that I noticed when I was following like the American elections and towards the end of last year was how data was being used to, like how focus group data was being used to understand the movements and the movements and the changes in tide regarding what people's thoughts were on the candidates and in general what political beliefs were predominant in the society at that time. Um, I I don't know if am I still audible?
Yeah. We can hear you, Francis. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so that was something that I noticed. And what I realized while I was like kind of watching that, I realized that that sometimes data can be used in those spaces, like in politics, to kind of to encourage accountability during elections. So so for example, if there is this, like if there's consistent and if there's consistent data gathered throughout the process leading up to the elections and even during the elections, like exit poll data and things like that, you can see where and predict based off of that kind of data where things should be going in terms of like the election outcomes. But then if it doesn't end up going that way, people have have something to use to encourage better transparency and accountability from the government and from politicians when things like that do not go according to like what was predicted by the data that was gathered.
That's very true. I think it also just it adds on to what we were saying earlier on about data doesn't lie, and sometimes our governments want to lie to us, but these are things that you just know, based on the data, you know that there's no way that, it's a terrible example to give, but you know that in a village of 5,000 people, there is no way that 4,000 people showed up and voted for Maduo, right? Because that village of 5,000 people probably has half the population of not voting age. But these are very serious conversations that we need to be having in our communities in terms of data integrity and accountability, and just building the proper systems so that, we can use this data to inform development and how resources are used and predict outcomes of elections and predict, patterns of how people move, because that's when now you are going to know that, okay, in a couple of years' time, this city should have grown by so many people, getting at migration patterns. But I don't know. It also depends on the priorities of your government. So sometimes you just don't have those resources to be putting into building these systems. Sometimes it's also just, I want to find a more diplomatic way of saying this, but sometimes it's just based on the priorities of that government. But the US election is one really good example, Francis, because I'm also always fascinated, you know, when I just watch how the whole thing is done. And I started paying attention to US elections during Obama time. And even then, it was pretty mind-blowing for me how pretty advanced their systems are compared to, you know, where I come from. But I think that's something we can all aspire to when we go into our different areas. I wanted to ask, in your respective fields, what do you use, you know, in what do you use to collect data? What do you use to communicate your data insights and all those things? Or just, you know, if you want to start a business, what do you imagine could work for you? Still on the call, right?
Yes, you are. I don't want to just be taking over the mic.
Does anybody want to come in before Francis? Data collection tools that you imagine would be useful for you? This is, I mentioned this because it's one area where I'm kind of like frustrated with work. Say in the UN system, for instance, depending on, it's not systematic what we use, which makes it very difficult for us to communicate or to share this data, which only makes our work a bit difficult in the end of the day. If any of you, earlier on somebody mentioned working for Dreams, so they would know DHIS, which is a system that is used in the health space. A lot of governments use it. A lot of countries use it. But you'd find that some other countries use some other tools. So it just becomes difficult at the end of the day when there's a disease breakout, like COVID, for instance, for all of us to pull this data and move as a collective or use it as a collective. Sarafina has mentioned tailored questionnaires, surveys, and social media analytics for primary data collection. I wanted to mention that one where you have to, when you get on an app or something, you are actually asked to consent, you know, for these kind of things, for your data to be used for, God knows what they use our data for. So that's also one area where the government is quite, I mean, the private sector is quite, it's quite advanced. And then also the reason why I mentioned the data tools that are used and, you know, what you use to then communicate whatever data you collected was also just for us to look into the value chain of data. There's some people who pretty advanced in how they collect the data, how they analyze the data. And then there are some people who are pretty advanced in how you then communicate that data. or how you collaborate with people on that data. So that just shows to you that there's so many opportunities in terms of like where you can go in your career when it comes to data. Some of us are forced to learn how to, I don't know, analyze this data from different sources, and you realize that it's not always collected in a way that makes it easy for you to analyze it. So there's really so many opportunities in this space if this is where you intend, you intend to build a career on, or you just want to work with people who are in this space. And then earlier on, somebody mentioned something to do with data governance, even though we didn't call it data governance back then, but just ensuring that data integrity is used or is taken into account for informed decision-making and accountability. So governance, like the word governance itself, is not just an internal thing. It's more about public trust or your stakeholders' trust. So more and more people are scrutinizing, businesses, UN agencies, because people are just losing trust in, people are just losing trust in organizations. Somebody's the host now. So in our area, it's very important for us to strengthen donor confidence and to strengthen community accountability. So it's one area that we can't ignore. And then for your careers and as you grow into leadership, I would just like you to keep in mind that data is a game changer, whether you are skilled in, I don't know, visualization, building nice dashboards, storytelling, which personally is my favorite. You can look at all the data that you want, and we tend to do that a lot, but also storytelling is very important. I can tell you 12,000 girls, do not have pets, or 12,000 girls are missing school because of menstrual, they don't have menstrual pets. But at the end of the day, if you can't relate that story to your sister or to your mother or to yourself, then it's just that, it's just numbers. So that's also one area that it's worth looking into. And I personally think that telling stories is much more effective than just giving statistics, which we tend to do a lot. Oh my God, my laptop is running out of power. And monitoring and evaluation, that's also one area that I think we really need. Oh, they call it monitoring, evaluation, and learning now. And I like that learning concept, because you can look at all the data, you can implement whatever you implement with the data, but after that, you should also be able to sit down and say, what have we learned? What have we learned from not only implementing this program, but also how we collected, processed, and used this data. So a lot of opportunities if you are interested in this field. A lot of work to be done in our side of the world. And who else to do it than us? I don't know if there's any, like a specific thing that either one of you wanted to get from this session and we didn't cover it, but we have a couple of minutes to go into that. Feel free to speak freely, maybe something you wanted me to go into and I didn't cover. I was trying to make it a free-flowing session and just base it on real life happenings and not more, you know. Somebody's asking me to speak more about data integrity. Okay. So in my space, for instance, we are accountable for not only the people that give us their money, but also the programs that we implement must actually, you know, have impact on the communities that we work with. Our operations, you know, how we actually do work. Like I was talking earlier on about limited resources these days. We also need to make sure that our operations are also informed by some data use. So you want data that is accurate, you want data that is actually complete and somewhat consistent so as to build a full picture. You know, when you say you are going to, I'll go again to the example of a clinic, of building a clinic in a village, you want that to be informed by accurate data, because that's not your money. It's not coming out of your pocket. So you need to build trust of people whose money you are using, so that you can always go back and ask for more, or you can tell them, one, I used the money that you gave me to do this, and if you give me this much more money, this is how much further we can go. But if you take public taxpayers' money, for instance, and misuse it, we're always going to feel like, one, we are wasting our money. Why should we trust you with more? Why should we fund you? And also, you're not serving anybody, because at the end of the day, our programs are for the communities that we serve, right? And then also it helps you optimize your operations. Because I'm not seeing it again. Are you still sharing your screen? No, I'm not sharing my screen anymore, I think. So really, data integrity goes hand in hand with guiding strategic decisions, so that we can make informed decisions, accurately assess what we've done, see where we fell short, and how we can improve in the future. And to achieve that, you need to build systems that are way beyond my comprehension of this. You know, I know it's about things like data validation. You know, when you collect that data, after you collect that data, you need to validate that, could this really be, could this really be accurate? It's also about how that data was collected, how you keep that data, just to make sure that, at the end of the day, the data is clean for you to use for what you need to use it for. I don't know if anybody has any questions. How is data collected and used in the monitoring and evaluation side of things? Are there specific tools people use in that area of work to tend to be on the program management of things? I'm also on the program management of things. And I think I kind of mentioned this in passing earlier on. I used examples of the public health sector, and they use DHIS. And in my area, it really just depends on the organization and their preference. But you find that some people really invest in this area and buy the proper infrastructure to collect and monitor and evaluate. And some people just use, simple old Excel sheets, which I find so frustrating. But I'm pretty sure there are, advanced tools that people in that area or specialized people in that area of work actually use. But I'll speak from my experience. And I just want to say that there's actually a department that is much, 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 much more advanced in this than, my program, where they built data centers. So I'm pretty sure if we went online and did some research, we could educate ourselves more. But in my small area where I work, we just, try to use the products that we have at our end, your Google Sheets, your Google Excel, just to collect, track and try to learn from that, or try to derive some meaning from whatever we have there. And I have to say that is pretty left behind. The world has moved on from using that. Does anybody else come in? Francis, please go ahead.
Thank you. I had quite a few questions because I'm just trying to understand, I guess, this space a bit more and like how it's used like practically in other areas, since I've mostly used it in like, program management side of things, but also in the government. I worked at the WTO for like a year, so I got to see a bit of that, but honestly, wasn't that different in terms of like the actual tools that we use. So I just want to understand better what other people are using. But also I was curious about like, what is like, is there a way, because for example, if you're an entrepreneur, for example, and you want to start a business, is there a way to kind of like investigate or to predetermine whether a particular process of data analysis, like data analysis and whether a particular project is involving the collection and analysis of data is worth undertaking before you actually undertake it? Like, because I'm just asking because I know that, like, for example, like working in the IGO space, like the project is kind of makes it clear what the boundaries are, in terms of like who you're addressing, like, what the breadth and scope of the project should be. Things like that are kind of baked into like whether it's the organization or like a larger body usually. But I feel like for entrepreneurs and for the private sector, like you are the one that's kind of defining, what is like what the boundaries of like the research that you're going to undertake, like maybe market research you're going to undertake, it will be. And so I'm wondering, is there like, and of course doing data investigation, if you're an entrepreneur, is going to be a lot more difficult in terms of like getting access to this information and the amount of time that you're spending on it. So I guess I was just wondering if there's a way to kind of like pre-vet a specific path of data investigation before you actually undertake it. I don't know if that's clear.
Has anybody here been in a focus group? I think they use that a lot in the private sector. I think I've been in a focus group a couple of times, but in most times where I've been in a focus group, you realize that they sit potential customers or whoever to maybe assess, say they want to do a rebranding exercise. They would sit customers in a room and ask them questions, try to elicit some responses and feelings just to understand if we go a certain route, what would be the outcome of this? If we change this, what kind of feelings would it elicit from customers? You can also use those kind of things, like interviews or surveys to just assess performance before you go mainstream. That's one way of that I know the private sector uses to just make data-driven decisions and maybe predict outcomes. And then you always come up with your own specific indicators, to track your progress and your impact. Like in my world, we would look at this like, okay, how many number of girls came into this clinic to access XYZ services, or how many women are interested in the pill instead of the injection, and we use that to then, know where we should be, putting our energy into. We know that we use that to maybe even go back to the customer to understand, why did you choose X over Y, and that is then used to maybe shape your programs. You start to see where you might need to do a little bit of educating. You start to see where maybe you need to be pulling back your resources. There's no point in putting money into Y if the people are not interested in it, because at the end of the day, it's really about the customer. But more and more we see that customers are investing in marketing, and maybe that's also something that we should do, where you have these I want to say testimonies, but most of them these days are not testimonies, so we should take it with a grain of salt, where you have people online talking about how, oh, I did this or I used this and this is how it worked for me. I love it for the cosmetics. Those people never had any skin problems, but they'll be there talking about how, oh, my skin was so bad and I used this and this is how it turned out. So that's just, one way where the private sector is kind of like getting ahead of itself, kind of like jumping the gun, but it's business. So, but my experience with this has been with focus groups, where you just try to sit people in a room and see what feelings and thoughts and perceptions your brand or the new product you want to come with elicits. And then you go back to the product development team and tell them, this is what people think. Maybe if we try to do it in a different way. Yeah. Even just, when you try to start a business on your own small little world, you always start with your family. Oh, what do you think if I made these? What do you think of these t-shirts? What do you think of this product? That's your way of doing, a focus interview without really formalizing it. So.
Sorry, that's great. And that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. My last question. is about the idea of what kind of information, how to use data effectively in the preparation of proposals, because I noticed that that's a part of your experience, and I would love your recommendations on what is looked for in a proposal.
You mean like proposal development for donors?
Yes.
Um,
And
I would
grants.
I'd always say start with, because you'd probably have a pool of donors. You know that if I approach the Swedish government with this, they are not gonna budge. If I approach the government, the American government with this, it's something that they are interested in. So you look at, your area of interest. You want to work on climate change, for instance. What does the data tell you on donors? Is there an appetite for it? What are donors interested in? Like, for instance, right now we're talking about HIV/AIDS, and there's just donor fatigue around that area, despite the fact that it's still a problem in our communities. So knowing what your problem is, knowing what the appetite is in terms of the donor community really informs, one, how you are going to end up packaging it. So maybe you want to work on HIV, but you know that when you just come up with the statistics and the numbers that you have on HIV, nobody is going to pick that up. But if you talk about climate change in relation to HIV, you could appeal to donor X because they're interested in climate change. Or if you talk about youth in relation to HIV, it could appeal to somebody because that's where they want to put their money. So that's just one aspect of it, right? Like the business development aspect of it. And also, again, you have another element to consider. Let's say you do get that fund and you have to implement the grant. What does the data say? How do you actually implement it? What's the best way for you to, without wasting resources, what's the best way for you to achieve maximum impact? You could look at, if it's climate change, you can look at one area in your country or one community that's mostly prone to disasters, or you can look at one area where maybe people are not so aware of climate change and you want to do some bit of sensitizing. So really, at every aspect of this, you need to be using data for you to, I don't know, not run around like, try this. You need to know that, okay, with the data that I have, if I approach these people and structure my proposal in this way, I'm likely to actually get some money. And then also, once you get that money, you use data to inform your operations, also your technical support. And then at every phase of the program, because even when you close out the program, you need to have some data of what happened, what transpired, what can you learn from it. And then, you repeat the cycle. Say you had a goal in mind that this is what you want to do with this community, but it didn't go that way, and you learned something, you picked some new insights. And how do you use that then for maybe your next program, or you do something different altogether? Because, programs can have the best of intentions, but life being life, it'll always go, the way life goes. So you need to be in place to pick that up and learn and evaluate and strategize. Sounds like I'm using buzzwords right now. Okay, we've kind of like gone a little bit over time. I hope that answers your question, Francis. If there's anything I didn't cover in this session and maybe somebody wanted me to discuss, my Instagram is, not my Instagram, Jesus, my LinkedIn is Maduo Latlhang. Let me drop it in the chat. I can always refer you to resources. One thing about the UN is that we publish a lot of documents. I can always refer you to resources. I can always ask a colleague who's much, much more informed than me and get back to you on it, or just, you know, point you on where to go to learn more about that area if you want. I just dropped my LinkedIn in the chat box. If anybody wants to connect and maybe continue this conversation outside of here. If there are no more questions, maybe then we can call it a day. I don't know how you guys usually close your sessions. And I imagine your sessions must be more practical than this.
It varies. You've quite well aligned to how the sessions usually go and being interactive and providing us quite comprehensive background. So thank you so much, Maduo.
All right, ladies. My battery is running low and I wish you all the best in your coding journeys. And honestly speaking, I could not imagine a better way to spend my Saturday, because like I said, the rest of the world is very, very advanced in this and we are lagging behind. So we need women and girls in coding, because I don't want to be drawn back into this conversation. But imagine a world where only men are coding and they are giving us the data. It's going to be a world that is very biased. So I think this is a very great initiative. We need more women. Yeah. Not even just uncomfortable. It's not a real world, because that's not a real world. So we cannot only have men coding for us and giving us data and informing the world that we live in. It's very biased, it's very flawed. All right, ladies, thank you and enjoy the rest of your weekend. I'm going to leave or end the session. I'm not the host, so I cannot end the session. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.